Islamic terrorism, and we will prevail. We cannot accept those who reject our values and who use hatred to justify violence against the innocent. Today, the West is also confronted by the powers that seek to test our will, undermine our confidence, and challenge our interests. To meet new forms of aggression, including propaganda, financial crimes, and cyber warfare, we must adapt our alliance to compete effectively in new ways and on all new battlefields. We urge Russia to cease its destabilizing activities in Ukraine and elsewhere, and its support for hostile regimes, including Syria and Iran, and to instead join the community of responsible nations in our fight against common enemies and in defense of civilization itself.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this was perhaps one of the best speeches given by an American president in the last 30 years or so. Your feedback, Professor Papahagi, Adrian, te rog, please.
Well, I have certainly noticed, like you, all the important buzzwords in the pieces that you excerpted from Donald Trump's speech in Warsaw. And he mentioned Pope John Paul II, and he said that together with John Paul II, who resisted communism and was a symbol even for nations who were not Catholics, like the Romanians and other Eastern European nations, together with John Paul II, Donald Trump said the Poles reasserted their identity as a nation devoted to God, a nation devoted to God. This, of course, rings a bell if one thinks of the American formula, one nation under God. Right? God is what has been forgotten in Europe. And I would like to invoke another important statement, almost manifesto, the famous Paris statement signed by important intellectuals like Roger Scruton or Remy Brague. And they say something very important, that Europeans have chosen to forget who they are and what their heritage is. They use the phrase, we are orphans by choice. We are not orphans because we have lost our parents, we have lost our past, but because we have chosen to deliberately, actively, even aggressively forget about it and ignore it. We are ignorant of the true sources of the humane decencies that hold us together, these thinkers wrote. And Donald Trump said very much the same thing half a year earlier in Warsaw. Then he mentioned communism. Now, very often Westerners are shy when it comes to mentioning communism on the par with Nazi atrocities, because National Socialism is ultimately post-dates communism. Communism started in Russia, its atrocities, the Gulag, much earlier than Hitler. Hitler imitated in a way the Gulag. The two atrocities, the two crimes against humanity are equally dire, equally horrible. By exterminating whole groups of people on account of not crimes that they may have perpetrated, but on account of who they were. These are exterminations based, in the case of National Socialism, on race, and in the case of communism, on social class, on social origin. So
both of them destructive of the human dignity and of the individual dignity of every person.
Of individual dignity, of course, because both of them are totalitarianism, but destructive also of whole masses of people, of peoples altogether. Don't forget the atrocities that
I think we are losing you. Okay.
Sometimes were exterminated. So communism should be mentioned as a horrible crime against humanity. And we Eastern Europeans, now speaking about what we can contribute to European culture, to the West, and to our understanding of history, we were shocked when we saw the president of the European Commission inaugurating a statue, a monument to the memory of Karl Marx, the founder of the ideology that destroyed Eastern Europe, held us back, paralyzed us for decades, and dragged us into poverty and totalitarianism.
By the way, that statue was funded by the Popular Republic of China, and of course by the Communist Party in China, and of course the leader of the European Commission is Mr. Juncker, or Juncker, the Americans would put it this way, who of course doesn't care about our sensitivity when it comes to Karl Marx. We were forced to eat.
He should, because he's closer to that than we are here, than Donald Trump is. And then also, I think that one can have no complacency with communism. One shouldn't pamper communist identity as if it were something generous or idealistic or anything of the kind. No, communism must be stamped from the very beginning as totalitarian, criminal, inhumane, and ultimately an atrocity that should never be encountered again in politics or in any other affairs. I also remember Trump for having a very tough stance on the death of Fidel Castro.
Exactly.
All the leaders of the West were competing to eulogize him. Obama was trying to find his qualities. Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, was finding Fidel Castro perhaps a great Democrat. And the same happened throughout Europe. Well, Trump, who was just president-elect, he was not yet acting president of the United States, I remember had a very good position.
He said the death of a brutal dictator, while Obama said history will judge. That nonsense, that Marxist nonsense, which makes history with capital H an instance of judgment, as if God was replaced by history and in abstract terms. So that's a kind of deferral. That's a kind of decision not to judge when basically the crimes of communism in Cuba, as in Venezuela today, as in perhaps Laos in Asia or Vietnam.
North Korea, another place where Trump is acting.
North Korea, exactly.
Perhaps ultimately to help those oppressed people get rid of a bloody, bloodthirsty dictator who is starving the population, who is sending his own uncles to the dogs, literally, or shooting his own uncles with a cannon. So that type of cruelty is what the leaders of the free world are trying to be complacent to. That's impossible to accept. It's unpalatable for us Eastern Europeans. And I'm very glad that Donald Trump, in Warsaw at least, understood the political momentum and also the place, the geographic place, and also the sensitivity of the people he was addressing. And really, his speech was very well received, I think, throughout Eastern Europe. Then he also
was the best, yeah.
He also spoke, and that's also very notable, he spoke about terrorism as an oppressive ideology, of Islam as an oppressive ideology. And this is what it should be treated as, not on the par with Christianity and Judaism, because I haven't seen any Jews bombing places or demolishing towers using planes or dashing into crowds with their cars. I have not seen that. And I have not seen this type of extremism, terrorism, aggression outside Islam. So Islam is certainly not just a religion, it is also an oppressive ideology.
It's a political movement. It's a political